He had dyslexia. He could not remember numbers. His own father told him he would never amount to anything. You would think someone who struggled to read product codes, who grew up on a farm where his grandfather had committed suicide over bankruptcy, could never build a retail empire, right? Well, Ingvar Kamprad managed to create IKEA, a company that became the world's largest furniture retailer. He revolutionized how every person on earth thinks about furniture. And he did it by turning his greatest weakness into his most iconic strength. So how did a dyslexic farm boy who sold matches door to door become one of the richest men in history, worth nearly $60 billion? To find out, we have to go back to 1926 to a tiny farm in the poorest region of Sweden. March 30th, 1926. Ingvar Theodor Kamprad was born in Ingvar, a village so small and remote that most Swedes could not find it on a map. This was Småland, a province in southern Sweden known for rocky soil, endless forests, and grinding poverty. People did not thrive here, they survived, and barely. Ingvar's family farm, Elmtaryd, sat on 449 hectares of this unforgiving land. But here is what most people do not know about the Kamprad family. They had money once. Ingvar's paternal grandparents, Achim and Franziska, were German aristocrats who fled their homeland in 1896. Achim came from wealth, from a family that had been estate owners for generations in Thuringia. His mother was even a distant relative of Paul von Hindenburg himself. But that aristocratic past meant nothing in Sweden. 3 years after arriving, everything collapsed. The farm's finances spiraled beyond saving. Achim Kamprad, Ingvar's grandfather, saw no way out. He took his own life, leaving behind his pregnant wife, Franziska, and 2 young children. This was not just a family tragedy. This was the moment that would define everything Ingvar would become. Because his grandmother, Franziska, did not give up. This stern, stubborn woman, who everyone else feared, saved that farm through sheer willpower and ruthless cost-conscious management. She worked every hour there was. She counted every penny. She made that 449-hectare farm profitable again through nothing but discipline and frugality. And young Ingvar watched it all. For the first 6 years of his life, Ingvar lived with his mother Berta at her family's smaller farm Mytorp. His father Theodor worked at Elmtaryd during the week, 20 kilometers away. But when Ingvar turned 6, the whole family moved to grandmother Franziska's farm. And that is where everything changed for the boy. Franziska adored Ingvar. She was harsh with everyone else, but she doted on this grandson. She taught him business by letting him play in her rural store. She helped him understand that buying in bulk and selling individually meant profit. She showed him that waste was the enemy and that every resource had to be maximized. But school was a different story entirely. Ingvar struggled. He could not keep up with the other children. Letters swapped places when he tried to read them. Numbers refused to stay in his memory. He was always the slowest in class. What nobody knew then, what would not be discovered for years, was that Ingvar had dyslexia. This learning disability made every school day a battle. His father Theodor grew frustrated. The farm always needed work. There were cows to milk, fields to tend, endless chores to complete, and Ingvar would shirk the hard labor whenever he could. One day, fed up with his son's apparent laziness and poor performance, Theodor delivered a verdict that would echo in Ingvar's mind forever. "You will never amount to anything," his father told him. Most kids would have been crushed. Ingvar did something different. He bought himself an alarm clock for his birthday. He set it for 5:30 in the morning, and then he removed the off button so he could not turn it off. If he could not be naturally good at things, he decided he would simply outwork everyone else. But here's what's remarkable. While Ingvar struggled in the classroom, he was already building a business empire in miniature. At just 5 years old, he started selling matches to neighbors. By 7, he had figured out the markup game. He bought matches in bulk from Stockholm, split them into smaller packages, and resold them at triple the price. His aunt in the capital would ship him box after box of matches. Then he expanded. Fish, Christmas decorations, seeds, pencils, pens, belts, watches. He loaded everything onto his bicycle and rode through the Småland countryside, making sales. His classmates played football, while Ingvar thought about profit margins. And around age 10 or 15, accounts vary. Ingvar himself said it was during these years that he had his first revolutionary insight. He noticed something that bothered him deeply. A pencil he could buy wholesale for a few would cost 10 times that amount in a local shop. Why? Middlemen, distributors, retailers, each one taking their cut. If manufacturing was so cheap, young Ingvar wondered, why did products become so expensive as soon as they left the factory? This question would become his life's work. This question would eventually change how the entire world bought furniture. But first, Ingvar had to prove his father wrong. 1943 arrived. Ingvar was 17 years old. He had just completed his studies at Gothenburg's Handelsinstitut, and he had done well, surprising everyone, especially his father. As a reward for good grades, Fyodor gave Ingvar a sum of money. Ingvar immediately knew exactly what to do with it. On a kitchen table at his uncle Ernst's house, Ingvar founded IKEA. The name itself tells the story. I and K stand for Ingvar Kamprad, E for Elmtaryd, the family farm, A for Agunnaryd, the nearby village. Everything about this company would be rooted in where he came from, in the poverty, the frugality, the Småland stubbornness. But IKEA did not start as a furniture company, not even close. Ingvar launched it as a mail-order business, selling whatever he could make money on: pens, wallets, picture frames, nylon stockings. He advertised in local newspapers and magazines, constantly experimenting with different products, different prices, different target markets. He was learning the fundamentals of commerce, testing what worked and what did not. Europe was at war. Distribution was difficult. Resources were scarce. But Ingvar found ways to keep operating, using old milk trucks to deliver goods to the railway station for shipping. And then, in 1948, Ingvar made a pivotal decision. He added furniture to his catalogue. Simple pieces at first, tables, chairs, all made by local manufacturers using wood from the nearby forests. The timing was perfect. Sweden was experiencing a massive housing boom after the war. More than 1 million new apartments were being built, and every single one of them needed affordable furniture. The furniture sold incredibly well, so well that by 1951, IKEA stopped selling everything else and focused exclusively on home furnishings. Ingvar opened a permanent showroom in Älmhult in 1953, giving customers a place to see and touch the furniture before buying. His pricing strategy was simple and devastating to competitors. Sell quality furniture at the lowest possible prices. Cut out the middlemen. Buy directly from manufacturers. Pass the savings to customers. It was the same insight he had as a 10-year-old boy staring at overpriced pencils. And it was working. Sales exploded. Between 1949 and 1952, IKEA's revenue shot from 1 million kroner to 6 million kroner, a six-fold increase in just 3 years. But success breeds enemies. Ingvar was about to face an existential threat that would either destroy his company or force him to become something entirely new. The Swedish furniture establishment watched IKEA's growth with growing alarm. Here was this upstart from Småland, this mail-order operation run by a dyslexic farm boy, undercutting everyone's prices and stealing market share. Traditional furniture retailers had operated the same way for decades. You went to their store, ordered a piece, and waited weeks or months for delivery while paying premium prices. IKEA was making them all look obsolete. In 1950, Ingvar wanted to exhibit at the Stockholm Furniture Fair, St. Eriksmassan. It was the perfect opportunity to reach customers directly. He took out ads in Stockholm newspapers announcing IKEA's presence. And when the fair opened, every single IKEA product had the consumer price clearly marked, something that violated trade fair norms and infuriated other exhibitors. The industry struck back hard. By 1952, the Swedish National Association of Furniture Dealers began organizing a coordinated response. They sent a clear message to every furniture manufacturer in the country: sell to IKEA and we'll stop buying from you. It wasn't subtle, it wasn't legal in any modern sense, but it was brutally effective. Suppliers who had been working with Ingvar for years suddenly cut him off. They couldn't afford to lose the business of the major retailers. Some tried to help secretly, shipping discontinued models, selling under different names, sending goods to neutral addresses in Älmhult instead of directly to IKEA. Ingvar even created a purchasing company called Ikano to route orders and bypass the boycott. And then the furniture dealers went further. They banned IKEA from trade fairs. In 1954, when Ingvar wanted to attend the Gothenburg Furniture Fair, he was explicitly prohibited. According to legend, he was smuggled into the fairgrounds hidden under a rug in a car trunk. But here's what the establishment didn't understand about Ingvar Kamprad. He'd grown up watching his grandmother save a bankrupt farm through pure stubbornness. He'd been told by his own father that he'd never amount to anything. He'd built businesses since he was 5 years old despite having dyslexia. Obstacles didn't stop him. They motivated him. The boycott only made us stronger, Ingvar would later say. The crisis became a non-crisis as we were constantly coming up with new solutions. Unable to buy the same furniture as everyone else, IKEA was forced to design its own products. Ingvar started working with designers to create original pieces. This gave IKEA something none of the traditional retailers had: a unique, distinct style. Swedish design, simple, functional, affordable. And because Swedish suppliers wouldn't work with him, Ingvar looked beyond Sweden's borders. He traveled to Denmark. He went to Poland, where labor was cheaper and manufacturers were eager for business. What started as desperation became IKEA's secret weapon, a global supply chain that no one else had built yet. By the late 1950s, IKEA had not only survived the boycott, it had emerged stronger, more innovative, and more distinctive than before. Ingvar had turned his greatest crisis into his greatest opportunity. But he still had one massive problem to solve, a problem that was costing him a fortune and frustrating his customers. Furniture is big, furniture is heavy, furniture is expensive to ship, and when it arrives, it is often damaged. Ingvar's mail-order business was booming, but the logistics were killing his margins. How do you ship a fully assembled table or chair without it getting scratched, broken, or taking up enormous space in a truck? The answer came in 1956, almost by accident. Gillis Lundgren, one of IKEA's early employees, was preparing to photograph a table called Lovet for the upcoming catalogue. It had a beautiful leaf-shaped design with a jacaranda wood top and brass-covered feet. After the photo shoot, Gillis needed to transport the table back to the office. He tried to fit it into his car. It would not fit. The table was just too big. Frustrated, Gillis looked at the table and had a thought that would change retail history. He asked himself why not just take off the legs. He unscrewed the legs, packed them separately, and suddenly the table fit perfectly in his trunk. And in that moment, that simple, practical moment, the flatpack revolution was born. Ingvar immediately understood the implications. If furniture could be disassembled, shipped in compact boxes, and reassembled by the customer, everything changed. Transportation costs would plummet. More furniture could fit on each truck. Storage requirements in warehouses would shrink dramatically. Damage during shipping would decrease, and customers could take furniture home immediately in their own cars, instead of waiting for delivery. Later that year, 1956, IKEA introduced its first flatpack product, the Love-It table, the same one that had sparked the insight. It was sold in a slim box with the legs packed inside. You bought it, took it home, and assembled it yourself. The concept was revolutionary, but it required something else, something that perfectly aligned with Ingvar's dyslexia. Traditional assembly instructions relied heavily on text, pages of written directions, lots of technical terms. That would not work for Ingvar, and he knew it would not work for millions of customers either. So IKEA pioneered visual, step-by-step assembly instructions, simple diagrams, numbered steps, minimal text. Anyone could follow them, regardless of what language they spoke or how well they could read. Ingvar's learning disability had forced him to think differently, and that different thinking produced instructions that were clearer and more universal than anything competitors created. Researchers would discover decades later that when customers assembled their own furniture, they valued it more. Psychologists would eventually call it the IKEA effect, the phenomenon where people ascribe greater value to things they have built themselves. What could have been seen as a hassle became a source of pride and accomplishment. Flatpack furniture transformed IKEA from a scrappy regional retailer into something that could scale global. But Ingvar still had problems with his dyslexia affecting daily operations. You see, as IKEA grew, the company needed a system for tracking inventory. Most companies used numerical codes. Product 4,738, Product 9,214, Product 5,529. Strings of numbers that meant nothing and were impossible for Ingvar to remember. But Ingvar could not work with numbers. His dyslexia made them swim and switch in his mind. So instead of fighting his limitation, he did what he had always done. He found a different way. He decided to give every product a name instead of a number. Real names, Swedish names, names that created mental images he could actually remember. The system was brilliant in its logic. Large furniture pieces like beds and wardrobes got Norwegian place names. Sofas and chairs took Swedish town names. Kitchen tables had Finnish geographic names. Chairs mostly had men's names. Rugs took Danish names. Garden furniture was named after Swedish islands. Suddenly, Ingvar could visualize his entire inventory. The Billy bookcase, the Lack table, the Klippen sofa. Each name created an instant mental picture, a location, a memory. What had started as a workaround for disability became one of IKEA's most distinctive and beloved features. Customers did not buy Product 7743. They bought Billy. It was personal, memorable, human. Ingvar's dyslexia had accidentally created one of the strongest branding systems in retail history. In 1958, Ingvar opened the first full-scale IKEA store near Älmhult. It wasn't fancy. It was more like a warehouse than a traditional furniture showroom. But that was the point. Low overhead meant lower prices, and customers flocked to browse and take purchases home immediately. He also introduced something nobody expected at a furniture store, a cafe. Ingvar realized that well-fed customers stayed longer and bought more. Those famous Swedish meatballs were not just a nice touch, they were a strategic decision. that would become an iconic part of the IKEA experience. By the 1960s and the 1970s, IKEA was expanding rapidly. Stores opened across Sweden, then in Norway and Denmark. In 1965, IKEA opened a flagship store in Kungens Kurva, outside Stockholm. It was the largest furniture store in Northern Europe, with a circular, Guggenheim-inspired design that guided customers through every department. Ingvar had a philosophy he called the potato field principle. Instead of paying premium prices for retail space in city centres, IKEA bought cheap land on the outskirts, literal potato fields, and built massive warehouse stores. Customers would drive out to these locations, but the savings from low real estate costs were passed on to them through lower prices. The company kept growing. Germany in 1974, Switzerland, more stores throughout Europe. The IKEA catalogue became one of the most widely distributed publications on Earth, eventually printed in over 24 languages, with a larger annual print run than the Bible. But there was something else happening during these boom years, something Ingvar did not talk about publicly. He was struggling with alcohol. The divorce from his first wife, Kerstin, in 1961 had been devastating. He had adopted a daughter, Annika, with her, and the marriage fell apart. Ingvar turned to drinking to cope, and it developed into a serious problem. He later described himself as a functioning alcoholic. He managed to run IKEA, to make brilliant business decisions, to expand globally, all while battling addiction. His solution was to stop drinking 3 times a year. He called it drying out. It was his way of maintaining some control over the habit. Not a perfect solution, but it allowed him to keep functioning. In 1963, he married Margareta Stennert, and they had 3 sons together, Peter, Jonas, and Matthias. The family would prove crucial to IKEA's future, but Ingvar later expressed deep regret about missing so much of his children's childhoods because of his obsessive focus on work. And then, in the 1970s, as IKEA's success continued accelerating, Ingvar faced a new problem from his own government. Sweden's tax rates were crushing, and regulations around foreign exchange made it nearly impossible to grow the company internationally while based in Sweden. Ingvar could either stay in Sweden and watch his global expansion stall, or he could leave the country where he had built everything. In 1976, Ingvar and his family moved to Denmark, then to Switzerland. It was a tax exile that would last nearly 40 years. Critics called it greedy. Ingvar called it necessary for IKEA's survival. But the distance from Älmhult created a different problem. How could he maintain IKEA's culture and philosophy when he was hundreds of miles away? His solution was to write it all down. On December 20th, 1976, Ingvar published what he called A Testament of a Furniture Dealer. It was 9 chapters of his business philosophy, his values, and his vision for IKEA's future. This document would become IKEA's constitution, its Bible, its operating system. The opening was simple but powerful. We have decided once and for all to side with the many. IKEA will offer a wide range of well-designed furniture at prices so low that as many people as possible will be able to afford them. The testament laid out everything. He demanded cost consciousness. Wasting resources is a mortal sin at IKEA. Any designer can design a desk that will cost 5,000 krona, but only the most highly skilled can design a good, functional desk that will cost 100 krona. He valued simplicity. Simple routines mean greater impact. He insisted on continuous renewal. Only those who are asleep make no mistakes. And perhaps most importantly, how employees should view their work. A job must never be just a livelihood. If you are not enthusiastic about your job, 1/3 of your life goes to waste. These were not corporate platitudes. They were the distilled wisdom of a man who had been selling matches since he was 5, who had overcome dyslexia through sheer determination, who had survived boycotts and built a global empire. Every IKEA manager was expected to know this testament like scripture. By 2008, IKEA had become the world's largest furniture retailer. Over 300 stores in dozens of countries, billions of dollars in annual revenue. The catalogue was being printed in 27 languages, with a circulation that dwarfed nearly every other publication on Earth. And Ingvar Kamprad, that dyslexic farm boy from Småland, was worth an estimated $58.7 billion. But here's what's remarkable. Despite being one of the richest men in history, Ingvar never changed how he lived. He drove a 1993 Volvo 240 for 2 decades. When people asked why he did not upgrade, he simply said the car still worked. He only stopped driving it when someone informed him it was no longer safe. He flew economy class every time. He stayed in budget hotels. He bought his clothes at flea markets. In 2014, after returning to Sweden, he told a television interviewer, "If you look at me now, I don't think I'm wearing anything that wasn't bought at a flea market." He even had a haircut budget, preferring to get his haircut in developing countries where it was cheaper. He would reuse tea bags. He would take salt and pepper packets from restaurants to use at home. He would visit IKEA stores specifically to eat the cheap meals in the cafeteria. His colleagues remember him visiting vegetable markets right at closing time when prices were lowest. This was not eccentric billionaire behavior for show. This was who Ingvar Kamprad actually was. The frugality his grandmother had taught him on that farm, and the cost consciousness that had saved IKEA during the boycott years never left him. "I am stingy and proud of it," he once said. Critics pointed out the contradictions. Yes, he drove an old Volvo and wore flea market clothes, but he also owned a villa in Switzerland, a country estate in Sweden, and a vineyard in France. He had driven a Porsche for some years. The frugality, they said, was just branding. Ingvar saw it differently. Every unnecessary expense at the top meant higher prices for customers at the bottom. If the founder traveled first class, why should not managers? And if managers did it, why not every employee? Then costs would spiral and IKEA could not fulfill its promise of the lowest possible prices. I look at the money I'm about to spend on myself and ask myself if IKEA's customers can afford it, he explained. If there is such a thing as good leadership, it is to give a good example. In 1982, Ingvar did something almost unprecedented in business. He created a complex ownership structure that transferred most of IKEA to the Stichting Inca Foundation, a charitable organization based in the Netherlands. His sons would inherit some wealth and control through the family investment company IKEA. But the bulk of IKEA, the stores, the brand, the empire, would be owned by a foundation with bylaws that prevented the Kamprad family from directly benefiting from its funds. He did this because Ingvar wanted IKEA to have eternal life. He had seen too many family businesses destroyed by inheritance fights, by grandchildren who did not share the founder's vision, by wealth that corrupted the mission. He wanted IKEA to exist long after he was gone, still serving the many people, still making quality furniture affordable, still maintaining its culture. As he aged, Ingvar stepped back from day-to-day operations. In 2013, at 87 years old, he resigned from the board, with his youngest son, Matthias, taking over as chairman. But Ingvar never really stopped working on IKEA. He would visit stores around the world, talking to customers and employees, always looking for ways to improve. There was one more thing people did not know about his past, something that became public in 1994 and that haunted his legacy. When Ingvar was 16 years old, In 1942, he joined a pro-fascist youth organization in Sweden called the New Swedish Movement. He remained active in it through the 1940s, even staying friends with the movement's leader, Per Engdahl, into the early 1950s. In a 1994 letter to IKEA employees, Ingvar called this the greatest mistake of my life. He said his father and grandmother had influenced his political views as a teenager, and he deeply regretted his involvement. In 2010, more evidence emerged showing his participation had been more extensive than he had initially admitted. Ingvar acknowledged flirting with fascism, but he maintained he had long since changed his views completely. It was a stain on his record that no amount of philanthropy or business success could erase. The boy who had grown up in the 1930s and 1940s had made terrible choices in his youth, choices he spent the rest of his life trying to make up for. January 27, 2018, Ingvar Kamprad died peacefully in his sleep at his home in Småland, Sweden. He was 91 years old. Pneumonia had finally claimed him. He had moved back to Sweden in 2014, after nearly 40 years away, wanting to spend his final years where it all began. He left behind 3 sons, a daughter, and a company with over 400 stores in 50 countries, serving 700 million customers annually. He left behind a business philosophy that companies around the world still study. He left behind proof that dyslexia was not a limitation. It was a different way of thinking that could produce revolutionary solutions. And this is remarkable when you consider where he started. A farm boy with a learning disability, a struggling student whose own father said he would never amount to anything, someone who could not remember numbers but found a way to run a global retail operation anyway, someone who turned a Swedish furniture boycott into the catalyst for designing his own products and building a global supply chain. When asked about his philosophy, Ingvar shared this: "We have decided once and for all to side with the many. What is good for our customers is also, in the long run, good for us." That simple statement explains everything. Not maximum profit, not luxury for the elite, affordable quality for the many. It is why IKEA created flatpack furniture that anyone could assemble. It is why Ingvar developed visual instructions that transcended language barriers. It is why he stayed obsessively focused on cost-cutting without sacrificing design or quality. Today, IKEA continues to operate according to Ingvar's vision. The Ingvar Foundation still owns most stores. The testament of a furniture dealer is still studied by managers worldwide. The frugal culture persists, and hundreds of millions of people furnish their homes with affordable Swedish design. But Ingvar Kamprad's legacy is not just about furniture. It is about proving that limitations do not define you. Your response to them does. It is about showing that frugality is not weakness, it is wisdom. It is about demonstrating that staying true to your values, even when you are worth tens of billions, matters more than any amount of wealth. The dyslexic farm boy who sold matches door to door became one of the most successful entrepreneurs in history. And he did it by refusing to accept that his disability was a barrier, by turning every crisis into an opportunity, and by never forgetting where he came from or who he was building for. That is how a poor Swedish farm boy created IKEA.